Bothers me is the rec seat with our.
So what you need to do is just
albatross one of our neck.
line, and then I'll give you this.
It seems like money wasted.
Yeah.
I just want to say, I didn't want to interrupt you. Oh, thank you. I feel pretty good. Non-election years are.
Oh, just to let you guys know, you are on a live broadcast right now? Okay, perfect.
We already signed away our life.
Okay. It's one that I started the broadcast, so, okay.
That also means we're supposed to stay, as I understand, within 2 feet of the screen on either side.
I'm trying, is PowerPoint going to be pretty integral to what you're doing? Or are you going to just be speaking like?
Video first, then PowerPoint.
Okay, that's good to know. I'm just going to pull this back.
Is there a way to, are these lights on separate switches or just one big switch? Oh yeah, you could do the front lights totally off. Try that.
Okay.
But then Beth and I and Zach are going to be in shadows on the field.
What about if we turn those lights off but then open the blinds? Try opening the blinds and see what that does. Is it too much glare?
Not too bad. We're facing north. Zach, can you stand in front of the camera so we can look? Yeah, we still need more light.
Yeah.
Still pretty dark.
Yeah.
Yeah. You stand right in front of the screen. Then we have a flashlight. Yeah.
I do have a flashlight on my keychain. Oh yeah.
That's not bright enough.
Yeah.
Okay.
We all use it.
So it's minimized, but it's still good.
So we know whose computer this is now, don't we?
Yeah. Now we got to shut it all off.
Cute kids.
You don't know where your things are on there, but.
That's a great picture, Christine. That's nice.
Yeah.
Good. Nice. Nice. Screens there.
Okay.
The only reason I am holding up for an extra minute is because of the fact we are live streaming that, just in case somebody in Sedalia who's planning to tune in right at 2:30 to see this. We hate to see them miss the introductions. This is our first conference where things are being live streamed, by the way. So this is a little bit experimental. We're only about 10 years behind the rest of the world getting caught up on these things.
It's exciting.
Nice thing is too, with our task forces, we're doing more and more things with conference calls and live streaming because it's so hard. The state is bigger than you think when you start trying to go from, say, St. Louis to Sikeston or Kansas City, even to Maryville, much less Cape Girardeau to Maryville. So I think our future is going to be more and more in events like this. Be there on the screen rather than be there in person. And I was a little surprised. I was on a conference call the other day, and suddenly I noticed on the bottom of the screen all these little thumbnail pictures pop up, and one of them was mine. I had forgotten I hadn't disabled the camera on my computer, so when I dialed in, it automatically connected. Fortunately, I had seen that coming, and over my shoulder is a map of the United States. A long time ago, I had taped to the front of the refrigerator that's behind me in that room, just so that it looks decent.
Yeah.
I was glad for the fact that it was a small picture because since it was a 10 a.m. conference call, I hadn't shaved it. I'd been working out in the yard, so I was in a t-shirt and unshaved. Had I known that it was going to be that, I might have shaved and put on a better shirt.
She doesn't, so what do you care?
Okay, it's 2:30. I'd like to welcome everyone to the 114th annual conference for Empower Missouri. Today's session is on 5 myths about food stamps. We're going to talk about hunger in Missouri and around the world. I'd like to introduce our panel today. We have Schmidt from Bread for the World, regional person. We have Beth Schmidt from the Greater Kansas City Food Policy Network. Coalition. And I'm Glenn Koenen. I'm head of the Hunger Task Force for Empower Missouri. We've got a lot of material to cover in 90 minutes. And we're going to start. Zach has brought a short video for us. So now we're going to see how well our technology works.
That's good. Hi, everyone. A very short video to introduce Bread for the World to you, and then I'll share a few words after we see that. So that was sort of telling the video was persistent, which made it like the technology held out for us, just like we are persistent in advocacy at Bread for the World. So Bread for the World has been around for 40 years. We were started by a Lutheran pastor who was in New York City in a poor neighborhood ministering there, and he was finding that insofar as he was preaching the gospel in word and deed and feeding the people in his community, even in his congregation, he just wasn't able to keep up with the need. And so the idea was born from Pastor Art Simon and some other leaders that we need to also be feeding people by addressing policies that keep them hungry, that prevent them from accessing the resources that they need to thrive. So Bread for the World was born. We focus on federal policy that impacts hunger, both locally and internationally. So we work on both. You saw photos of both in that video. Strictly, our focus is solely advocacy, so that sets us apart from a number of organizations in that we don't do the direct service. I should probably be over here more tonight. Yeah, that's right. So we're strictly advocacy, which allows us to be targeted and effective in the approach that we take. But we work in partnership with groups that do direct service and do hands-on work. And my role is as a regional organizer, so I'm responsible for engaging with congregations, individuals, people in multiple different states that I cover, just equipping people for advocacy. Letting people know about the issues that we're working on, what's going on in Congress, what bills are currently being considered and voted on, and then helping people get involved, writing letters, as you saw, making phone calls, sending emails. So we've, over for the world, talking about food stamps and SNAP programs. So so that's us in a nutshell. Thank you.
And in your packet, we have a couple of things up here. On the second page of the packet is a sheet titled Hunger by the Numbers. This is something Empower Missouri has been doing for a long time. It's kind of a snapshot of where we are and putting things in perspective. For example, right now, about 1 person in 7 in the state of Missouri receives food stamps. 1 person in 7. The great irony is most people don't realize that because we've made the food stamp program so obscure. People carry an EBT card now that looks just like every debit card. And so people can use their benefits now much more discreetly than in the old days. But the bad news is people don't realize how many of their neighbors are getting food stamps. One person in Southern Missouri, 846,970 people. Now that's down from our high during the recession. You can see there we're down about almost 100,000 since the height of the recession. But this August, we fed more people in Missouri with food stamps than we did in August 2014. We hit a plateau, and now we're growing a little bit, not a lot, but like 2.1% in a year. However, those 1 in 7 people are not spread evenly about the state. In some counties, especially in the Ozarks, it's about 1 person in 4 getting food stamps. We have some counties on the Blue Hill, almost to the Arkansas and Kentucky borders, where more than 30% of the population is on food stamps. In the city of St. Louis, it's about 28.5% of the people on food stamps. So we do have some counties where we have large concentrations of low-income people. The good news is that we have other counties with less people needing food stamps. But there is no county in the state of Missouri without a food stamp population of at least 7%. Even St. Charles County, which is doing rather well, even some of our rural counties, which are very self-sufficient, we have food stamps in every corner of the state. Another way to look at it, though, is what food stamps bring into Missouri. Every month, despite cuts to the program a couple of years ago, food stamps are pumping $104 million or more given to people, and you do not save food stamps. You take your EBT card, you go to the grocery store, and you spend that money in the community. So it's $104 million per month in activity at grocery stores all across the state, thanks to food stamps. Ask a grocer if they'd like to lose 1 in 7 people in their community as a customer. And you'll see very quickly why the Grocers Association and people in the food industry are big supporters of food stamps. Now, food stamps were never intended to supply all the family's food needs. As a result, virtually everyone getting food stamps in Missouri also goes to a food pantry. That's important or easy to understand because the average benefit in Missouri is about $1.33 per person per meal in food stamps. You would think being a national program, those numbers are pretty much the same across the country. It turns out there are a lot of bureaucratic things and small administrative things that can make a difference. In Illinois, this July, last month I have on, the average food stamp benefit in Illinois was about $1.49 per person per meal. And in some states it goes up to as much as $1.52 per person per meal. So there are things in Missouri that can be done bureaucratically that could probably make a big difference over the course of a month in a family's food budget. Now, we talk about food pantries, let's also remember that food pantries supplement food stamps and federal programs. We'll be talking more about that later. I'm going to give you a number you're going to hear a couple of times, and that is for every dollar shared by a food pantry or charity, federal government anti-hunger programs provide $20 or more in aid to hungry families. $20 is the conservative estimate. I've seen some estimates as high as $24 to 1. So that's why it's important when we talk about food pantries and you hear that, oh, maybe charities can take over that role. It's not going to happen. We can't make our food pantries 20 times the size they are. Another thing to remember, those last 2 numbers in the sheet, I am a policy wonk. I'm a numbers person. The federal government says a family of 4 is only poor if their income is below $24,250 per year. I defy anyone, anywhere in the state of Missouri, to provide a sustainable, stable lifestyle to a family of 4 on just over $2,000 a month. And last, median income in Missouri, most recent data, $48,363 per year. That is the median income in the state of Missouri. Now, when I was younger, we used to call Missouri the average state because in the middle of all the charts and so on, we were always in the middle. Then we became the 40-something state. Now we're getting close to being the 50th state. One place that shows up is in median income. Nationwide, the average median income, taking Alabama, Alaska, everybody together, is about $52,000 a year. That's more than $100, about almost $100 a week difference between Missouri and the national average. Think about that for a minute. If every family in Missouri had an extra $100 a week to spend, the impact that would have on our economy. So that's why, even though we're talking about some large numbers, when you work it down to an individual family, these are important numbers. $100 a week, as you saw there during our last presentation, for those families living on $2 a day, those families in extreme poverty, we do have many of those in Missouri, think if they had an extra $100 a week coming in, how much better their life would be. Now, on the back of this sheet here, just in case we forget to tell you later, for additional information, we have first emails for Zach, Beth, and myself.
So I should make a correction. I'm Zach Schmidt, not Jack Schmidt.
I'm sorry.
J, so no problem.
I'm sorry.
It's Z Schmidt.
Z Smith, I'm sorry. Autocorrect. It's best. But also, also Missouri Department of Social Services and monthly management report where you get up-to-date numbers. Read for the World email. I hope that one's right.
That is right.
Empower Missouri, our Hunger Task Force part. The Food Research Action Center, we'll be talking more about them later. Greater Kansas City Food Policy Coalition, Missouri Food Bank Association, USDA food plans, in other words, how much you should be spending on food, and SNAP data. We're going to be talking today about this, but it's also important to know when we talk to make sure our facts are right. So please keep this list and feel free to refer to it. And now I'm going to turn it over to Beth, who's going to show us some neat slides about what's going on in Kansas City.
Well, sort of. Great. Good afternoon, everybody. Coalition. But I actually want to expand on my self-introduction and say that my full role is actually as the VP overseeing policy efforts at KC Healthy Kids. And as part of that role, I act as the director of the Food Policy Coalition. We work on changing the built environment and policy around healthy eating and active living so that everybody has real meaningful opportunities to live a healthy life, whether they find themselves at home, at work, at school, or out at play. And I have been working furiously recently, and yesterday afternoon I rode in a train from Kansas City to Jeff City, and it was my first moment of pause so I could think about what I wanted to say today, and I was riding through central Missouri along the Missouri River, and what a beautiful time of year to take that trip. You know, the most striking thing to me as I watched the miles fly past was not the colors, it was the changing the communities I was passing. They don't look like they did when I was growing up. You can see the poverty encroaching. There were low-income housing developments when I was a kid. That hasn't changed. The thing is, it's the same low-income housing development, and it's got 30 years additional wear on it. And the tiny little houses on Main Street in these tiny towns, they're no longer tiny. They're showing signs of disrepair and neglect. And I thought about that, and it really made me sad, you know? It hurts my heart what's happening to this state. And I felt deeply sad because I've been working on issues relating to this trend for 15 years now, like many of you, and many of you have been working even longer on it. And there's a lot of reason to be sad, but then I thought about the fact that I'm coming here today, and it gave me some hope. And it gave me hope because you all are gathered here with us today to talk about how to change hearts and minds. We framed it as myth busting, but ultimately, that's not the goal. The goal is to change hearts and minds and create a different kind of action to move the tide back. Anybody else here felt sad recently at the state of affairs.
Very.
Anybody else excited about an opportunity to discuss how to shift that? Good. So I was actually in Topeka the first half of this week. I'm a Missouri girl, but Casey Health Kids serves all of the metro area, and so we do work in both states and both state legislatures. And I was meeting with advocates all throughout Kansas to talk about what can be done to stop the loss of grocery stores. They are shutting more rapidly than we can keep pace with, and it's becoming a crisis. And that was something that I was thinking about as I was coming here. And one of the strategies that we've been exploring is around SNAP and WIC utilization, because in Kansas, as in Missouri, as in the rest of the nation, SNAP and WIC reliance rates are higher in rural areas than they are in urban areas. And many small rural grocers don't have the actual EBT infrastructure to accept benefits. They also don't have benefits rewards programs that would allow us to do fruit and vegetable incentive matching programs that might drive further business to those stores. And so we're talking about those interventions. And that all seems quite relevant to what I want to share with you today, because it's about telling a story. And I've spoken a lot so far. I haven't told you many facts or myth busted much yet, but I've been telling a story. And my entire presentation is, in fact, sort of predicated on the idea that, in fact, the best kind of myth busting is, in fact, storytelling. It's not about just countering fact with fact. Because most of us learn pretty early on, probably when we're teenagers arguing with our parents over something or another, that merely contradicting someone is probably nothing. You might be right, but it probably won't matter if you ever won their heart and their mind. Unfortunately, too often we do treat our facts as though they are duct tape. Yeah.
Next one.
Okay. Great. Okay, so facts are not advocacy duct tape, guys. Contradiction just doesn't work. I have given you some slides, not because I think my slides are endlessly fascinating, they're mostly pictures, but that's an important part of my strategy. I tend not to put facts up on slides, and I tend not to give facts to elected officials and other decision makers, not because we don't have them, not because they aren't on our side, but because there is some fundamental psychology at work when you give people facts, and they don't necessarily go in favor of moving you towards your goal of changing the mind. So when I look at, this might be a little tricky. Remind myself every time I change slides. Thank you. Luckily, there are only 7 slides. It's not endless. All right, so this is a picture of the Royals. Is anybody Royals fan here? At least for right now. Are you?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Okay. So when I see this slide, when I think about the Royals, I get really happy. There's a beautiful energy in Kansas City right now, and even if you're not a Royals fan, you could probably relate to the energy for your favorite team if you've ever been in a playoff. It's something that connects people that I don't have a lot of common ground with. I can at least talk with them about this, and it immediately high off a sense of connection. And that plays to some fundamental human characteristics. We like to feel like we belong, like we are understood, that we are part of a team. And sharing beliefs with our perceived community makes us feel safe. It's the way it is, right? Unfortunately, what that means is that as a way of fitting in with our team, we often think about facts in terms of how they validate our existing beliefs. So when we hear 80% of SNAP recipients aren't supposed to be working because they are children, seniors, or disabled, instead of hearing 80% of SNAP and WIC recipients are working, you hear, ha, I knew 20% of them weren't working. Remember, they're not working. Indigents. So that's a problem. But luckily, it can be turned on its head. We can turn that tendency to want to belong on its head for our use in persuading people. Right. So there's a whole bunch of research out there about persuasion and messaging and changing beliefs. And people tend to understand beliefs in terms of reinforcing or understand new facts as reinforcing already held beliefs. But you can prepare a mind to understand new facts in new ways if you start the conversation differently. Instead of just starting by contradicting their belief, instead, if you get them to a place of feeling connected with you, feeling like you are on their side, you have a shot at actually moving them to a new belief. One of the tested ways of accomplishing this is to get someone to either tell you or write down for you. Writing isn't very practical in the context of most advocacy situations, so we'll go with talking with you about them. But talk with you about something that they're very proud of, an accomplishment that they're very proud of. What that does is two things. First of all, it makes them feel understood and appreciated because they're telling you about something they are really glad they did. Mm-hmm. Second of all, it's putting them into a place of action and achievement, right? Like, what are we going to do? I have responded. I have done things. What am I going to do affirmatively here? So you're setting the stage in a really useful way. It doesn't have to be food related, but we're talking. So can anybody give me some examples of ways that you might engage decision makers well in advance of needing them to take action, so that they feel that they have an accomplishment they already share with you by the time you need to?
Well, it might seem shallow, but I am connected with a lot of people that I am on the opposite side of through social media, through Facebook and things like that, so that you know when they're celebrating an anniversary or like their kid goes off to college or whatever, so that you've got like just very neutral things that you're celebrating together, so that when you need to talk about something heavy like food stamp policy, then you've already sort of broken the ice.
Yeah, we've got some common ground. Mm-hmm. So I'll give you another example. I know sometimes harvesters and other pantries will invite decision makers to come to their facilities and assist in packing supplies or sorting supplies or doing some activity that a volunteer might do at their facility, and work with them perhaps even in making it a community event of some sort. Ultimately, that is not going to solve our bigger issues around food insecurity in this country, that kind of action, but it does allow you to make a connection with the decision maker and gives them something they can feel proud about. And then when you meet with them, ask them about it. Hey, what did you think of that? How did that feel? What were you able to share with your constituents, or things of that sort? Now, it doesn't have to be, as I said, it can be a bill that they pass it can be a bill they pass that you hate. It doesn't matter. Ask them to talk about it. But really, they'll be, if they're proud of it, that's the point.
I approached the legislator last year. I heard you passed the bill you wanted to pass. He said, I didn't think you were in favor. I said, that's irrelevant. Congratulations. Yeah. And then we got to talking after we continued our conversation. Then I got to what I wanted to speak about, but she was in control of the conversation.
Yeah, so the key, now the trick is to really draw them out about it. They need to tell you about it, right? You can't just acknowledge it and move on. You got to actually get them to like brag.
The conversation moving on. She was controlling the conversation. Owning.
Good. Excellent. All right. So I want you to keep that in mind. The next part of what you have to do is reframe, right? There are a lot of really negative connotations with wiki staff. There are a lot of myths. If you can't contradict them outright, if doing that just reinforces the belief, what do you do instead? What's the alternative to that? It's using a frame to talk about the subject that does not feed into the underlying beliefs. So what are our underlying beliefs about SNAP and WIC that feed these myths? That people are not hardworking, that rely on it, that they are unemployed, that they don't really need the help. I found some research last year, a couple years ago, that I thought was really interesting. It was conducted by Food Policy Action. They do quite a bit of messaging research, and they conducted polling around cuts to SNAP during the Farm Bill reauthorization. And by far the most persuasive message that they were able to identify was that the impact of the eligibility cuts would have on hundreds of thousands of veteran households which receive benefits around the country. And why is that? It cut across party affiliation, it cut across age, gender, you name it. This was a really powerful, persuasive message. I would argue that it's because the fact that we are talking about veterans evokes fundamental beliefs about veterans that run contradictory to the myths about SNAP and WIC. We believe that veterans are hardworking, that they are dedicated, that they are proud and don't take handouts, that they don't actually really need help. And so by reframing, without ever actually talking about whether or not SNAP recipients can, should do work, you have immediately implied hard work by talking about veterans. So instead of talking directly about statistics in Missouri and how many Missourians who receive SNAP benefits are actually working adults, we could instead talk about the fact that in 2013, roughly 44,900 families who received SNAP assistance had a veteran in Missouri. 44,000 Missouri households with veterans rely on SNAP. We might be able to talk also about the number of veterans who are being served by your food bank, your pantry. This slide and the next couple of slides are slides that I used in presentations that I do in conjunction with harvesters about food insecurity and also about the Child Nutrition Act reauthorization. It contains WIC, it's a federal bill containing WIC and lots of other nutrition assistance programs, and it's currently going through its reauthorization process. So you can see it's the same picture. This quote is the comment that was placed on this paper plate by Amanda, who's a customer, a client of Harvesters. And she is talking about why her family relies on Harvesters when they have helped this household that receives needs from Harvesters. And so I usually use this slide to talk about the fact that 27% of Harvesters' clients households include a veteran. And we talk about the difficult choices that veterans like those in her household are having to make about what to do with their inadequate income. And this infographic is from Feeding America. It indicates the number of food insecure households who indicated that they have had to choose between food and utilities, food and gasoline and transportation costs, food and medical care, and so on over the course of the last year. And it helps folks understand the true meaning of food insecurity, right? What is it to be a household with a member who has just returned from deployment overseas, having to make decisions about whether to get their medical care for their family, take care of their housing, or keep the lights on, or eat? These are the people who Harvesters wants to help. 27% of their households contain a veteran. But when Harvesters is focused on serving the meal gap, meeting that meal gap, those households who do not qualify for any nutrition assistance because their income exceeds the allowable levels, but who don't have enough to make ends meet. And we always talk at this point about Harvesters having to make difficult choices as well. If you want to go to the next slide. Harvesters, like the households that it's trying to serve, has to make a really tough choice, because when SNAP and WIC benefits eligibility or participation drop, those households don't stop being food insecure, they just come to Harvesters. And Harvesters only has one bag out of the 20. So if we cut WIC eligibility levels substantially at the federal level through the Child Nutrition Act or at the state level through restrictions, that means that Harvesters has to take their one bag and figure out how to serve a larger group of people. And so when we're going through this presentation, we normally at this point stop and say, you know, Harvesters really wants to serve that gap. We want to help people move out of poverty, make the leap back into the middle class. But when you limit our opportunity, expand our need base, we have a limited ability to do that. And what's more, if more people are coming to us and not spending money at the grocery store. If you want to go to the next slide. Because this is the other end of things, right? What's another shared value? Let's see if there's one more. All right, well, you guys, there's a really great slide that's missing. It's on our handout. Well, good. We have a great anything. So the slide shows a rural grocery store. I mentioned earlier that rural communities have higher reliance rates on SNAP and WIC. That means that they feel the impact of cuts to SNAP and WIC that much more. Rural grocers are, there's a lot of economic data that shows that grocery stores in small towns and communities are canaries for the economic health of the community. Grocery store fails, the community has been in economic decline, and that is sped up by the disappearance of the grocery store. You want to find a grocery store that's failed. Grocery stores, in the best of circumstances, industry average profit margin is between 1.5% and 2%. Grocers who are present in low population, economically depressed areas, urban and rural, typically operate off of profit margins that are closer to 1 to 3%. It's extraordinarily narrow. And small changes can make a substantial difference, a substantial enough difference to put a store out of business. If you decrease the number of people who have dollars to spend in their store and send them instead to the pantries, you aren't just harming Harvesters' ability to serve the food insecure working people that they were intending to serve, you are also harming the ability of that local economy to respond in a resilient way to economic recessions and other incidents of economic stress. And you'll probably create negative cycles in the economy that are difficult to stop once started. So I have given you those last few slides. I know you've got a white screen now, but you've at least got them on your paper, because I wanted to talk with you about the ways that I have used those lessons about reframing in a practical way in my conversations. I think that there are a lot of decision makers who have incorrect beliefs and assumptions about SNAP and WIC recipients and about food insecurity in our country. But I have not found it is especially productive for me to go in and just clarify that they are wrong. What I have found works is talking with them, establishing a rapport, talking with them about the struggles that their community is facing. And most rural decision makers are perfectly aware that they are dealing with economic strain in their communities. And they want to find a way to solve it, and they don't want to make the situation worse. Talking with them about finding ways to ensure that you can stabilize a grocer, ensure that the neediest have support, and that Harvesters can help the people who are working and trying to move out of economic strain and back into the middle class. Those are messages that tend to be more successful because they give an opportunity to engage as a leader for their community, a leader for positive change. And they play into shared beliefs and understandings. I talked for quite a while. I hope that was helpful. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thanks. Now we're going to get to our handout. First of all, How many people here saw the last episode of Mad Men? Okay, Mad Men. It was a TV show that was popular with millennials. But anyway, Mad Men ends with Don Draper, who's been the hero of the show for several years, at a commune in California. And it ends with the Coca-Cola ad described by many people as hippies singing on a hillside. About a year before that TV show came up, I was at a seminar and they were explaining that was a seminal moment in advertising. Because what does a number of people singing on a hillside tell you about soda pop? The answer says nothing about soda. It tells you about feelings. What we have today is a society largely driven by feelings. Now you see it in advertising all the time. There used to be just beer advertising. Oh, you drink the right beer, the pretty women will come to you. What we're seeing though today now is this belief, I call them fairy tales. And one of the things we're seeing now is that they're not just positive fairy tales, but they're negative fairy tales. And we're seeing them more and more often. People like to take the easy answer. And for example, in food stamps, I can trace this back to a couple years ago. I know I'm not supposed to pick on any one TV network, but Fox News. Okay, Fox News did a documentary on food stamp fraud and abuse. One of the things they did was they highlighted this young man who is a white rapper in San Diego County, California, who drives around in an Escalade, lives in an apartment on the beach, and he wore a camera to show himself using his food stamps to buy lobster and sushi. For about 5 months before that documentary aired, they were showing clips of it on Fox News shows. This came up at a session in Washington, and all of a sudden these people at a table in the middle of the room start laughing their heads off. It turned out they were from the San Diego County, California welfare office. What had happened was, this guy, this was a put-up job. His record company provided him with the Escalade and an apartment, but he had no control over it, so it wasn't counted as income under California's food stamp rules. He had a contract to get free clothing and everything. So he guessed he qualified for food stamps because he had nothing in his name, not even the clothes on his back. But what happened? That fairy tale got out in the media and Fox News. They kept repeating it. I was on a call-in show with a St. Louis radio station. A gentleman called in and he sounded very sincere. And he swore that the person ahead of him at a Schnook store had used their food stamps to buy lobster. Okay, I know that part of St. Louis, so I stopped back by there on my way home. And I asked them where their lobster tank was. And about 3 or 4 people nearly fell over laughing. They said, this is South St. Louis. We don't sell live fish. Now, remember your science classes, lobsters aren't really fish. Right. But the thing is, this gentleman had seen that fairy tale. He had seen that story so many times on Fox News that he had basically a version of Woodstock syndrome. You may have heard of that. If you survey the population and extrapolate it out, 18 million people went to Woodstock. Right. In reality, few less. But people get so in their mind, they don't mean to, but things get changed in their mind. Memories become real that didn't happen. You get branded in. You get branded in their mind. We're seeing that a lot with food stamps. We're seeing that a lot with social services. We want to talk today are a few of the most common myths. And we're going to do 2 parts. We're going to give you reality. We're going to give you suggestions how to change the conversation. I am one of those fact-based people. I did that hunger by the numbers. I've been keeping track of food stamp numbers in Missouri since 1989. In my basement, when they used to have the hard copy of the monthly management report, I have virtually every month from February 19th to put them in recycling until I found out the state of Missouri may not have all those months. So until I can find somebody else to take them off my hands, they're in some neat boxes in my basement. But the thing is, I'm a firm believer that numbers are reality and that you can counter myths with reality. It turns out I'm wrong. What we saw this year in the legislature, both Jeanette Oxford and I testified in different hearings on Senate Bill 24. in 2 different hearings, we were effectively told by legislators from the majority party that our facts were wrong. The facts I were using were from that monthly management report, a census report, and a University of Pennsylvania study. But they believed facts from the Cato Institute, Heartland Institute, places like that. So we can't get anywhere with the facts. But it's important that we know the facts, we know the reality. For example, probably the most common myth that we see of sushi with his food stamps. And of course, people will swear they